Hand placing decorations in a large world takes way too long, so I built a system to do it for me. No level design needed, just a bit of experimentation and a sprinkling of procedural generation magic. I wanted a way to fill my world with natural looking details, things like rocks, trees, debris, but I didn't want to place it all by hand. Let me walk you through how I got it done. Obviously, in order to procedurally decorate, I need to have some decorations available on hand. So the first thing I did was draw a few decorations, things like rocks, small grass, mushrooms, and I even made this tall grass so that when you walk by it wiggles a bit. Next up, procedural placement. Let's start with a super simple decoration placement strategy, also known as a DPS, and we'll slowly customize it until it decorates to our exacting standards. The simplest DPS I can think of is just to place objects on a perfect grid. It probably won't look very good, but let's give it a shot. At least we'll have a starting point, and we can improve our DPS from there. The main problem with this strategy is that it creates a grid pattern. Ideally, our pattern will be a bit more random, like you might find in a forest. So I guess let's add some randomness. We can actually get pretty good results by just shifting all of our grid points by a random offset. So now our grid is a bit less gritty, but there's still some issues. We can reduce our grittiness by increasing the distance of the random offset, but increasing the distance also increases the chance that two decorations end up too close together. This issue may not be an issue for your project, but for Mythfall, it's not exactly what I wanted, so I decided to look a little deeper. Enter Poisson disk sampling. Let's break down what those words mean, because it sounds pretty complicated. In case you've been living under a rock for the last 200 years, Poisson, or more precisely Simeon Poisson, was a French mathematician who is famous for a lot of things, one of which is the Poisson distribution, which is a way to model random events. But don't worry, we don't need much in the way of statistics to decorate our game, because the next two words are disk sampling, and that's all we really have to do. So let me set the stage. Instead of just placing our grass in a uniform grid, let's just randomly plop it down wherever our random number generator tells us to. But right before we place the decoration, we'll check to make sure it isn't too close to another decoration. Essentially, instead of placing down individual points, we'll place down disks and we'll ensure that no two disks overlap. When I first added this to Mythfall, I actually stopped here, but after spending some time looking at the artwork in other games, I think there's actually a super easy improvement which builds on top of disk sampling and adds a lot more flavor to the world layout. The main problem with just doing disk sampling is that you end up with a natural looking but evenly distributed world. Basically everything looks the same-ish, but what I wanted was for each biome to have more clutter, more variety, more sections and subsections of things going on. So I decided to add a cluster placement layer on top of my disk sampling. So instead of placing one tree, rock, or whatever my decoration happens to be, I place a cluster of decorations. This divides the problem into two sections. Disk sampling gives me a uniform layout for placing clusters, and then clusters give me a dense section of some decoration that fits the biome. Clusters can be anything from small groups of nearby trees all the way to fairy rings. When a cluster type gets picked, it can contain its own layout algorithm. So for example, when I place tall grass, I just randomly pick positions in a disk. But then for fairy rings, I can change that to pick positions in a ring. Or if we wanted to do a wall, we could just randomly walk on the tile map and place wall sections. I love the look of what this algorithm generates. You end up with really natural looking sections of grass and trees, but then you also find the occasional forest blank area. Another formation that emerges is when two clusters overlap. You get this sort of amoeba layout where two circles intersect a bit, causing it to look like one weirdly shaped cluster. To organize the full procedural generation, I decided to create a list of what I call decoration passes. Each decoration pass is configured to place disks of a certain radius, but then when each disk is placed, I select a random cluster and place it down in that position. Not all clusters need to have multiple objects. Sometimes I just place down a single tree or whatever, so that there's a baseline frequency of certain objects in a biome. Right now I order my passes like this. I have a low frequency single decal pass just to create some cohesion in the world. Then I do a high frequency grass cluster placement pass to fill everything in a bit more. Then I finish with a high frequency cluster placement pass to fill in other non-grass objects into the world. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. This clustered approach really made my world feel more alive. I hope it helps you in your game dev adventures as well. Anyways, that's all I have for this week. As always, an absolutely massive thank you to all the supporters on YouTube, Twitch, GitHub, and Patreon. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.